Hello, Dr. Maya Ziegler of Monarch Family Chiropractic. I really appreciate that you are here tonight talking about the importance of your microbiome. Now, for some people, that is a new term. For others, they understand that, man, it's kind of a trendy term also with where healthcare is going as we understand the importance of microorganisms and how they play a role in our health and well-being. So we're going to get into it tonight. I'm excited because this is the first workshop that we're doing live in the office as well as Zoom. So thank you for being here. And we had a couple hiccups with setting up our projector. So it's not always going to be like this, but we do hope that together we can be in person and connect and really understand, how we can support the best of our health, as we roll through these topics. So with that, let's get into the microbiome here. Can you see that okay? Excellent. Okay, so I wanted to start with this quote: all diseases begin in the gut. And this was what Socrates said, however many years ago that Socrates was existed in his philosopher life and asking questions and, about all things. And what's fascinating is when we look back on history and we see things like these statements Socrates made about disease beginning in the gut, we're seeing that science actually is showing up as true to some of these statements. It's pretty amazing. So all diseases begin in the gut. Let's dive into understanding that a little bit more. So your microbiome, I want you to think of your microbiome as this diverse and unique makeup of microorganisms, so the actual bugs that make up your gut and different areas of the body. They're all over your skin. They make up you, and understand that your microbiome is very specific to you, very specific to me, and it's based off of our history, our family history, what we've been exposed to, the life we've led, the choices we've made. It is completely different depending on who we are with. Could be completely different, so if we take all the people on the call today and really assess their microbiome, we'll see a completely different range and diversity in that microbiome. So we're finding that it is critical and more than just digesting our food. It is controlling center for the entire body. And what that means is our microbiome is linked to manufacturing vitamins. It's regulating our metabolism and blood sugar. It influences genetic expression and brain chemistry. If we think about that, right, we're not that many years off of thinking that, you have this gene, and because you have this gene, you are going to get X, Y, Z. And then came this category of science called epigenetics, which is how our lifestyle choices, our belief systems, the things we do on a day-to-day basis actually turn genes on and turn genes off. So if we lead a lifestyle that tends to be more inflammatory, tends to be more stressed, we turn genes on that put us on a trajectory of health that create cardiovascular stress or cancer or whatever chronic disease you want to put in that category. And as we dive into understanding these microorganisms that make up our microbiome, we're finding that this microbiome, these bugs, play a huge role in our genetic expression and turning genes on or off, which is fascinating. So for every message the brain sends to the gut, so the brain sends one message down to the gut sends 9 messages back. So the gut is really talking to our brain, and it controls a lot of things. Our brain response to stress, our brain hormone production, if you want one of these. The activation of the brain's immune system, the growth of new brain cells, and how adaptable those new brain cells are to learn, which is a really big deal. I mean, this is all coming from the bugs in our gut. And if you lived in the last 2 years, lived through COVID times, we have turned into a population that is scrubbing everything clean and putting on hand sanitizer whenever it's literally a trigger. We see hand sanitizer and we go to put it on, right? We don't even think about it. But what I'm telling you today is your microbiome is so vital and so important for brain health, for all things health, that if you're disrupting that with antibacterial components to get rid of it, it can cause a lot of problems in your body, in your brain, in your health. So microbiome, majority of the microbiome is located in your gut, but it can be on your skin. It can be in any mucous membranes like your nostrils, your eyes, can be in your armpits. It's all of the bugs that make up the health of your existence. So we each host a completely unique microbiome composed of trillions of bacteria of several hundred species. So where your brain weighs about 3 pounds, your microbiome can weigh up to 5. I've even seen 6 pounds. So you take all the bugs on and in your body and you put them on a scale, they weigh almost 5 to 6 pounds. So twice as much, nearly twice as much as your brain. Okay, sit with that for a second. These are bugs. Kind of freaks people out, but I'm like, no, these are good. This is good stuff. It's beneficial. And that microbiome has 100 to 150 times more genes than the 23,000 genes found in your human DNA. That's pretty amazing when you think about that. So 10 times more cells of bacteria in our gut than our cells in the rest of our body put together. And again, if majority of our microbiome is located in our gut, you look at our intestines, which is a tube of 20 to 25 feet, lined with microvilli. Think about that as like shag carpeting, and all of that helps aid in digestion, the things that we bring into the body to be building blocks for all activity. You flatten out all that microvilli, and the surface of our intestines is the size of a tennis court. Oh my God, it's pretty amazing. So you think about that, and you think about how big bacteria are, and there's bacteria lining that entire thing, right? It's kind of hard to imagine. So I don't typically like to put on, videos that last a couple minutes, but I think NPR does a really great job of describing to us the invisible universe of the human microbiome. So let me make sure. I think I got to make sure that I am, you guys can hear when I share my screen. So let's look at here. Oh yeah, share sound. All right, so I'm gonna hit play and we're gonna listen to this for a couple minutes. So if you guys can't hear me or hear the video, just wave your hand or tap on the video and let me know.
The next time you look in the mirror, think about this. In many ways, you're more microbe than human. There are 10 times more cells from microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, than human cells in and on our bodies. And our genes are outnumbered 100 to 1 by microbial genes. Scientists even have a name for all these microbial genes, the human microbiome. Now, this might make a lot of people rush for the hand sanitizer. But it turns out most of these microorganisms aren't bad, germs that will make us sick. Most are good. And without these good microbes, our bodies don't seem to do as well. We don't seem to be as healthy, and we actually might get sick more often. So one question is, where do our microbiomes come from in the first place? Well, like a lot of things, it starts with our mothers. As the infant passes through the birth canal, it gets coated with microbes from the mom. These microbes may kind of seed the baby with just the right mix. Combined with bacteria in breast milk and other microbes we encounter early on, they seem to slowly take shape in our first few years of life. The overall mix of our microbes becomes very personal, sort of like a fingerprint or maybe a blood type. But our microbes tend to resemble those of our parents and siblings and may stay with us for much of our lives. They may also be doing all sorts of things. such as educating our immune cells, like this one, teaching them the difference between things they should fight off, bad bugs that might make us sick, and things that aren't a threat, like our good microbes. When we're adults, microbes become our first line of defense, fighting off germs that try to invade our bodies, protecting their turf while protecting our health. Scientists have discovered they can even spew out their own antibiotics. The types of microbes in your body vary depending on exactly where they live, like different ecosystems in nature. There are wet places like our mouths, noses, and armpits, oily places like our scalps and backs, and dry places like our forearms. Different species of microbes have adapted to each of these habitats. The biggest, most important microbial habitat seems to be in the gut. It's the most complex, the most diverse, and everything microbes are doing everywhere else in our bodies, fighting off infections, revving up and dampening down our immune systems, signaling cells, that's all happening in the gut in spades. They even seem to help regulate our metabolisms, how much energy we burn and how much fat we store. So if it's not functioning properly for some reason, because of what we eat, antibiotics we take, that may actually lead to all kinds of diseases. Diseases like colon cancer, colitis, maybe even diabetes and obesity. Some scientists think one reason a lot of diseases are increasing is because we've lost key gut microbes. Our microbiomes look far less diverse compared to those of people in less developed countries and earlier generations. And remember how we get our microbiomes in the first place? From our mothers when we're born and from breast milk? Well, some scientists think that too many babies aren't getting that because of all the C-sections and not enough breastfeeding, plus all the antibiotics kids get these days and our obsession with cleanliness. All this may help explain why problems like asthma and allergies have been soaring. Maybe because our microbiomes never taught our immune systems how to work the right way. Maybe swallowing good.
Okay, we're gonna stop there. This, pull this back up. Okay, so we're gonna stop there. I loved how NPR did a great job, or PBS, whoever it was, did a great job of giving us a nice picture of our microbiome. You know, we have this crazy picture of microorganisms and bugs as a very, very bad thing. But when you look at all the good bacteria in the world, it's like 99.9% of the bacteria is good bacteria. And a small percentage is actually bad bacteria. And the big thing I want you to think about is if there's imbalance within that bacteria, that's where it becomes a problem. Because I want you to think about all these your microbiome as your best friends, right? They are trying to support your most healthy and vitalistic state. So when it becomes a problem is if you have imbalance within your microbiome, and that can really wreak havoc on your health. Now, I don't want to get into, specifics or a lot of details about this, but typically your bacteria fall into two different categories. You have the bacteroidetes, which I looked that up. I think that's how you say that. Bacteroidetes, which is the dominant group of bacteria we host. That is made up of the beneficial, good, healthy stuff. That's what we want most of our microbiome to be made up of. And then you have these firmicutes. I didn't say that the right way. I don't remember how to say it. Firmicutes, something like that. And we are not as happy to have these guys as house guests in our microbiome. Individually, they aren't a big deal, but when they're concentrated in large amounts, that's when it becomes a problem. And then they overwhelm the bacteroidetes, and you get much more challenges when it comes to how you are experiencing the world. Now, understand that 70% of our immune system resides in the gut. Okay, so if we have an imbalance between these primary groups of bacteria, it means an imbalance with our immune system. It means challenging times with whatever we're exposed to. just kind of like the video mentioned. Primary offending invaders that set off an autoimmune response in the imbalance of bacteria that live within us increase our risk for heart disease, cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, additionally leading to depression, anxiety, memory loss, brain fog, and mood swings. And I mean, you look at the last 10, 20 years, I mean, microbiome has become a much hotter topic. If you do a Google search, microbiome will come up like 10,000 or more. You look 10 years ago and there was not much there. So we're learning more and more about how important the microbiome plays a role here. And if we understand that chronic disease is a problem, heart disease is the leading cause of death, we've got people who are experiencing tremendous amounts of mental health stresses and challenges with depression and anxiety. Don't you think that if the conversation is how can we support a healthier body from inside, we can experience different health outside, right? So before we go there, because I took a lot of this information from, it's called the Autoimmune Fix. It's by Dr. Tom O'Brien, who's a functional med practitioner. But let's just talk about that epigenetic component, right? The epigenetics, how our genetic expression, what's turned on and off, create a sequencing for heart disease or a sequencing for cancer, right? Because there's no gene for Alzheimer's. There's no gene for headaches. It's a genetic sequencing. And when you get the genetic coding, that's where you start to see something like a headache or a migraine or a type of cancer or heart disease show up, right? Actual genetic conditions are like sickle cell anemia or type 1 diabetes, okay? So this is what Dr. Tom says. He says, humans are made up of 23,000 genes. You compare us to worms, they have 90,000 genes. So they're much more complicated than we are in terms of genes. And yet I think we can all agree that, we, in terms of how we experience the life, we are much more sophisticated and capable of doing more things, right? So he says, where does our sophistication come from? It comes from the fact that we are really made up of two genomes. The human genome, which is fixed, right? Those 23,000 genes, that can't change, the difference between us and a worm. Then we have our microbiome, which contains what I said earlier, 100 to 150 times more genes than human genome. Genes control function. That means the microbiome has 100 to 150 times more influence on our daily function than the human genome. So really addressing the health of our microbiome, the health of our microorganisms, helping create balance between healthy bacteria and higher concentrations of these firmicutes. I'm not saying that right again, but helping that balance of those two groups really changes how we express health in every way, not just health as in cardiovascular health, but in how we experience the world, right? Our mental health and experience. So really vital. So what harms that? The video mentioned this. Our use of antibiotics. I want you to think about an antibiotic is kind of like dropping a bomb on your microbiome. I mean, it damages and destroys everything, good and bad. Okay, and if 70% of our immune system is made up or resides in our gut, and we think about the last 30 to 40 years of antibiotic use, and we have antibiotic resistance because we have bacteria that evolve and become resistant to use, and that means we need to use more antibiotics, then we start to see systematically we deplete our intestines of good bacteria. And I'll circle back to this. If 70% of our immune system is in our gut and we've been taking an antibiotic, for whatever reasons, and they have their place, how does that impact our ability to protect ourselves from colds, flus, viruses, cancer cells, and more in the future, right? And Dr. Kristen mentioned this last week in our allergy conversation is maybe you're not taking antibiotics, but what about the food that you eat? Because the majority of antibiotics that are used in our country is consumed by our livestock, our cows and our chickens, and then we spray it on our crops, and then we see antibiotic residue on, meats and produce. So we are getting it, and we see it in our water system as well. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't take antibiotics that often or don't have a history of it, you're still exposed. It's everywhere. And so where they have a place in the world, a lot of times, like 23% of cases of, children where they're prescribing antibiotics is sometimes for a cold or sometimes for fungal infection, and antibiotics are only for bacterial infections. So we see that as well. And this begs the question of something called the germ theory versus the terrain theory. And I think this is worth a conversation here. The germ theory is if you have a bacteria or a virus or XYZ, that means you will get XYZ. You're exposed to the germ, you get XYZ. Well, if we just take COVID as an example, I know multiple people or multiple households where one person got COVID and the rest didn't. Or one person was exposed, spouse got it, and the other person didn't. Why is that? And I think the better question is, or the better theory is what we call the terrain theory. Okay, what's the health of the environment so that when you're exposed to XYZ, why does one person get it and one person doesn't? And I think the microbiome and the conversation around your microbiome and the health of that gives us a better understanding of, oh, if we've got healthy balance and a diverse microbiome that we are consistently supporting on a daily basis, when we're exposed to colds, flus, viruses, cancer cells, and more, that's maybe why one person gets something, one person doesn't. The other big harm to our microbiome is how we respond to stress. This is where chiropractic plays a huge role with, nervous system, demand on that nervous system and how we respond to our world, right? If we shift into that sympathetic state in a very unsafe way, all blood from our vital organs is, shifted to our extremities to power our muscles and keep us ready to go. Adrenaline's pumping, right? So if we are in a stress state and we feel that things are unsafe, then we don't have blood flow and health to all of our vital organs, including our gut. And that stress can be physical, chemical, emotional. So that is a large bullet point that we are bypassing because you can get that in a lot of other workshops that we do. So we've got a couple minutes left. So I want to cover how to support a healthy microbiome, understanding that we could probably do a couple more workshops on microbiome. I just want to give you the overview today. So I think you need to think about how are you feeding your microbiome? And the biggest thing is choosing colorful, high fiber fruits and vegetables. They're finding that polyphenols, which usually give these colorful fruits, or these, like even wine has high polyphenols, dark chocolate has polyphenols. They're seeing those rich colors generally are high in polyphenols, and that is feeding our microbiome in a very beneficial way. So choosing some colorful, high fiber fruits and vegetables is the best thing you can do to support your microbiome. And choosing the right carbohydrates, because if you're eating a lot of processed foods, they feed the bad bacteria, that increases the concentration of those bad bacteria, and that creates an imbalance, which shifts you into a completely different state of health. So avoiding chips, French fries. I don't know what reeds are. That's a typo. White rice, cookies, crackers, desserts, and sugars. So avoiding those and really focusing on the right kind of carbohydrates, which shifts you back up to that first bullet of, high fiber fruits, vegetables. According to Dr. Tom, he talks about more brown rice, different types of carbohydrates there. Grass-fed, red meat, and healthy fats. Again, we go to grass-fed talk about organic is because those animals are raised differently, more intentional around the practices that we use, not using as much antibiotics. Eating foods that they were meant to eat, right? Cows' digestive system were meant to digest grass, not grains, not corn. And that's where a majority of our conventional, cows are raised on. And the other one I think that is really easy is eating a fork full of fermented foods every day. That's kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, pickles, kombucha, tempeh, miso, apple cider vinegar, yogurt. I mean, most probiotics that you can get in a store, they're around 10 billion CFUs of bacteria. Now you can get up to the powerhouses, which is 100 billion. I've even seen 250 billion, but you're spending a chunk of change on that. And that's typically used for more acute conditions of flare-ups of more colitis, that sort of thing. A fermented food can contain 10 trillion CFUs of bacteria in one forkful. So this is a really easy way to expose yourself to some healthy microorganisms. And one of the recommendations that I've been given by a functional med doc that I worked with is, he said, rotate your fermented foods. You don't want to constantly be exposing your body to the same microorganisms. So, if you're a kombucha drinker, get different types of kombucha, get different types of, kefir and kimchi and all of those things. How can you rotate it? This functional med doc, I like to share this. He lives in North Carolina, and he said, well, when I was in California out surfing, he said, I just drank down some ocean water because that contains a lot of different microorganisms that I am not exposed to. So you want to get as much diversity as possible to introduce to your body, because the more diversity you have, the healthier you are, period. The other thing I want you to keep an eye on is, people think yogurt can be really healthy, but tend to add a lot of sugars to yogurt. And so you just want to keep an eye on the things you're choosing. You want high quality stuff. Yogurt, you can get plain yogurt and add fruit to it or add honey. That's probably more beneficial than, say, some of the things they're adding to yogurt to sweeten it on their own. So the other thing is actually having a probiotic that you take. Sometimes you see prebiotic and probiotic. Prebiotic is the food that your microorganisms eat. Okay, or prebiotic is what your probiotic eats. So sometimes you want to make sure the stuff that's supporting the health of a microbiome has appropriate nutrition. So sometimes you'll see a prebiotic, probiotic. And there's lots of things. It's 6:19. I'm going over, so I want to end with this last piece here. The other way to support your healthy microbiome is addressing the stress in your world and how you adapt to that. And at Monarch Family Chiropractic, we do that multiple ways. But one is to, get your chiropractic care. I find that, and Dr. Kristen can probably share this too, and you guys probably can share this too, is as soon as you're getting adjusted, start to notice ease, start to notice better sleep, start to be more willing and open to make different decisions, start to consistently make those decisions and add more things to it. And so when you're getting chiropractic care, know that it's not just helping with the support of your back, but it's helping with your brain perceive things and make better choices, as you continue to move through life. The other thing is spinal workshop engagement. People who show up on the workshops tend to improve by 30 to 70% than those who don't. We consider this a third of your care. And we know that if you are showing up to workshops and really understanding how the importance of your microbiome, it's going to hold you accountable to doing things that are most healthy for you. And the last thing, and I said this to somebody earlier, you hear people say, your 5 closest friends, You know, you look at their pocketbook, look at their financial situation, you're probably the average of what your 5 closest friends are making in terms of your finances. And I will say that's a perfect analogy for your health. If you look at your health, it's probably a reflection of the 5 closest friends. So the people that you hang out with, the people that are consistently holding you accountable and supporting you and uplifting you in your social circles, that is a reflection of what life will look like for you 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And what does that look like? Is that what you want? Is that what you want for your family? And it's a great question. I'm not saying get new friends or keep your friends. I'm just saying that if you want to make a bigger health impact on your health, you need to find people who are ready to do that with you and uplift you in that, right? Not make fun of you for showing up at the chiropractor, or not questioning why you're not going to happy hour, or not choosing to drink alcohol versus water, or not making fun of you for working out on Saturday, right? I think we've all experienced that. So that's where, if you share what you've experienced here at Monarch Family Chiropractic with those that you care about, know that they'll have a choice. They choose to, be here as somebody who gets their spine checked, be here as somebody who is showing up in workshops. We know that they will probably be healthier in the long run. So that's my ending with this one. There's a lot of information when it comes to microbiome. Dr. Chris and I both have tons of resources if you want to dive deeper, but I think this is good stuff to just start with as far as supporting the health of your microbiome. So we're doing live workshops from here on out. That means that when we are done, we can answer questions in more detail. So we hope that you'll be in the office with us in the future, but we'll continue doing Zoom as well. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to stop this recording.